Hello, and welcome to my teaching video. I currently have the sound off because I wanted to explain a few things. The class that I'm teaching in this video is called AWW, Academic Writing Workshop, which I teach at MICA, just down the road from Hopkins. This is a class that, as you can tell from the title, focuses on writing, especially academic writing. And it's basically in conjunction with another class called Critical Inquiry. So all the students that I have in my class also are in Critical Inquiry, whose professors I work closely with in order to provide the students instruction that's immediately relevant to their Critical Inquiry class. So the lesson that I'm conducting here is on subordinate clauses. I have a very, very short PowerPoint that I went through with the students on subordinate clauses. The idea being that while my students are well aware of complex sentences and certainly can read them, they're very wary as to actually writing them. So a lot of this is review for them, but what I'm trying to do is to get them comfortable with writing more complex sentence structures. And so throughout the weeks I've been focusing on noun clauses, and here I'm focusing on subordinate clauses. And finally, I'll just add that anytime I teach straight grammar in my classes, it really only lasts about 5 to 10 minutes. Before we move on to the students actually putting the structures that they've learned into real-world, genuine academic practice. That's primarily what I'm concerned with, since again they are already familiar with these structures. And one other thing is I apologize for having to edit my students out of the video, but I have run into some FERPA considerations. So my students are there. You'll kind of hear them and see them throughout the video, but not their faces, unfortunately.
All right. Now that's it for my PowerPoint. I have an activity for you guys. Here's what you're going to do. Any questions, by the way? It's just kind of like review, right? Yeah? All right, so take a sentence here. She's so careful. All right, you've all been given a sentence with a subordinate clause, with a subordinate conjunction, rather. Okay, so now what you got to do is you got to come and find the sentence, the independent clause that makes the most sense. So you actually got to get up and come look for the one. Tony, what do you think? You've been left with an illogical sentence?
I don't think it's it's not.
Tony looks dubious. He looks a bit doubtful.
I'm confused about it.
Well, read yours aloud. Read it nice and loud, and we'll all give you our opinion on whether it makes sense or not.
Oh, my.
Yeah, read yours aloud, yeah.
Whereas his essay has great potential, yours is looking rather hopeless.
Whereas his essay has great potential, another vocabulary word, yours is looking rather hopeless. Give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. What do you guys think? Does it make sense? Whereas your essay has great potential, or his essay has great potential, yours is looking rather hopeless.
Can you repeat again, please? Sorry.
Whereas his essay has great potential, yours is looking rather hopeless.
Whereas being like but or while, right? Or although, even though.
I don't think.
You think it does make sense? Do you think it makes sense? Yeah?
It kind of makes sense, but kind of a bit, they have something to
Like I'm
add.
kind of scratching my ear with this. It is what I intended. I did intend that to be together, yeah. I was thinking a teacher would say like, whereas Whereas his essay has great potential. Yeah, yours is looking kind of hopeless, or like that. Okay. Yeah, why don't you read yours for everybody?
Okay, even though I'm totally buffered,
Befuddled.
even though I'm totally befuddled by your ideas, they might make sense to someone else.
Even though I'm totally befuddled by your ideas, they might make sense to someone else. Thumbs up? Yeah, thumbs down? Anyone disagree? Thumbs up? All right, yeah, Ed, that is the one I intended. Good. All right, cool. Go ahead. Kuma?
While the weather varies all over the United States, it's usually going to be cool in the
Oh, that was an easy one, huh? That was easy. Yeah, I saw you. You went up and you just like picked it right out. We got weather and cold, so. Yeah, while the weather varies, another vocabulary word, changes all over the United States. What did I say? It's what in Baltimore? Cold?
It's cold.
I guess that's not really true, though. Baltimore's weather even varies a lot. All right, good. Young, go ahead and read yours.
Once we assess the difficulty of the situation, we can make a decision on what to do next.
Pretty easy, right? Once we assess the difficulty of the situation, another vocabulary word, assess, we can make a decision on what to do next, right? You assess and decide. Assess and then decide. Crystal.
Though some people think that the decline of books is inevitable.
Inevitable.
I believe that more people will be reading in the future than ever before.
Right, though some people, even though, whereas some people say that the decline of books is inevitable, I believe that more people will be reading than ever in the future. And did we do yours, Claire? No? Go ahead.
Also, I wouldn't assume that my professor knows everything. She does seem pretty informed about a lot of stuff.
Yeah, although I wouldn't assume that my professor knows everything, she does seem pretty informed about a lot of stuff. Okay? And you can let these sentences just expand, beautifully. They don't have to be this short. Pretty good. Pretty good. Pretty good. Okay. I'm going to switch gears. So you got the subordinate clauses, right? And they're great for those nice complex sentences. So you're not writing like these simple sentences one after the other. You need simple sentences sometimes, but you also need to mix them up, mix and match with some complex sentences. Honestly, a lot of these work identically, like even though, although, whereas, while, though, they all work fairly identically. Your job is just don't use the same one all the time, right?
So at this point in the lesson, I go over with the students quoting, when to quote, how to quote, why to quote. Basically, I just end up doing that with a piece of paper, just with bullet points before we actually move on to an activity, which is what you will see next.
You'll usually be quoting academic texts, right? We're going to have some fun and quote each other. So here's how it goes. A. And you can interview whoever you want here. If you want to interview your partner next to you, that's okay. You're going to interview your classmate, and then he or she will interview you. Okay? The questions there are on the bottom. You're going to ask your classmate one of the following questions, just one. First option is, what was the most exciting thing you did last summer? Explain it. Second one, describe a situation where something completely wacky, completely crazy happened to you. Or 3, what's the strangest thing that happened to you at work? Okay. The interviewee, that's the person getting interviewed, must give more than a one-sentence answer. You can't say, what's the strangest that happened to me at work? Well, I was washing dishes at a diner and a zebra walked through the door. Okay. That doesn't offer much in the way of quotes. So you kind of really have to expand your answer, right? You really kind of have to tell a story here. You can even make things up too if you guys want. It doesn't have to be entirely true. So the interviewee must give more than a one-sentence answer. He or she has to expound. Expound means simply to explain in depth. There's a new word for you. Expound. Explain in depth. Okay. Talk, explain his or herself in detail, detail, detail. We want details. Otherwise, what's your friend going to write? Second, maybe third, fourth step, whatever it is, you're going to write down some of the more important things that your friend says. So as you guys are interviewing each other, have a pen, have a piece of paper, and write down some of the things that you think are important that your friend is saying, right? Because that's what you're going to use for your quotes. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to write a paragraph about your classmate, not about your interviews. You're not going to say, you know, well, Ralph stood in front of the class with his hands in his pockets. I interviewed. No, your interview is, or your piece of writing is solely about the person you've interviewed. Just make it about him or her. And you're going to include a quotation, right? A quotation, just like in the newspaper. The quote must be relevant to the sentences that precede it. So in other words, what I mean is,
And at this point, I basically sat back and had the students interview one another. And then towards the end of the class, I had about 15 or 20 minutes to write their articles in which they include quotes from their interview. And so that is all for my, albeit somewhat low-tech video. Thank you for watching, and I hope to meet the viewers of this video over there at Hopkins in person. Thanks again.